Behind the Leaf discusses cannabis in terms of education, history, culture, policy, and advocacy. It is geared for adults only. If you are not an adult, come back when you are.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Behind the Leaf. My name is Steven, Community Outreach Director for the LBCA, and I am here with Pam Chaudaswati, who is the Education Director. How you doing, Pam?
I'm doing well, Steven. How's it going?
Good. What do we got for this episode of Behind the Leaf?
So this episode, Behind the Leaf, we are going to kick off our back to school drive. So it's summer, even though we've been in the house for a while and some of us are just getting back out, but it's summer, if we didn't know.
Back to that time of year and back to the kids doing what they do best of being students. And we did talk about it. We did hear a few concerns and voices from the community, and it was that since these students are now back they're not back, but they're at home, they didn't have basic school supplies, correct?
That's correct. So when we reached out to our community leaders, they definitely said some kids didn't even have paper. Some of them didn't have paper in the house just because we were on lockdown so quick. A lot of homes didn't have school supplies in the home because we were at school.
So we are actually super excited. We do have all of our LBCA member dispensaries participating, and we have donation receptacles at each facility. We're taking papers, pencils, coloring notebooks, even hand sanitizers, USB sticks, anything to help these kids be successful.
That's right. So if you wanted more information, you can always go to our website or our social media platforms, and we have our post and all the information there, direct you to our members' dispensaries to drop off some items.
And we're super excited to have this one. This is our third year doing it in a row, correct?
That's right. Just not this big. We haven't done this big of a push. This is the first year that we're doing this big push.
We're super excited, and we're looking forward to all of our members supporting our efforts. So on this episode of Behind the Leaf, I got the opportunity to sit down with Long Beach City Prosecutor Doug Haubert and talk to him about AB 3330.
And we'll also be taking on a tour of BelCosta Labs and to get all nerded out with our scientists. And we'll also be taking you inside the city to City View. The City View Senior Building, where we've been delivering meals every Thursday.
We get a chance to sit down with community member Robbie Coda and find out exactly where our cannabis tax is being spent. And lastly, you're going to visit me with High History, and I'm going to tell you about a little campaign called Hemp for Victory. Join us on this episode of Behind the Leaf.
All right, let's go.
Hey, what's up everyone? It's Robbie with the LBCA community member. I'm just out here to let you know that we're doing a drive for our Title I schools in Long Beach. I'm out here today at the Jane Addams Elementary School. The students are in dire need of supplies, and we'll be kicking off this drive June 15th through August 15th. Come out and support. For our back to school drive, we're accepting paper, composition books, reading books for the elementary, crayons, color pencils, Play-Doh, bubbles, sensory toys, whiteboards, USBs, anything you think the students would need so that way they can get back to doing what they do best. All of the donation bins can be found at one of our LBCA member dispensaries, and you can find the list here. For more information about the school drive and how to get further involved in your local community, make sure to check out the lbca.com, as well as find us on Instagram at the LBCA as well.
We've been delivering here every Thursday. Although they deliver food here Monday through Saturday, the LBCA team has been delivering every Thursday since the COVID lockdown in late March. So with the rest of the food, if there's food left over, we take it to the AIDS pantry, which is where we're going to head to right now. And actually the food comes from, if you don't know about the World Center program, the food comes from a couple different local restaurants. They get paid $10 each meal to make. So today these meals came from Lola's in Bixby Knolls. And please join us next time. If you want to get involved with us to do some community work, give us a call.
Hey guys, I'm Ron Brooks here, Lab Director for BelCosta Labs. Come on in, let's do a tour. When every sample first comes in the lab, it has to be properly intaked. So the first step in the process is that it comes into this room where it's entered into our proprietary limb system tag leaf. We take a picture of it, enter in all the proper information, what distributor it's coming from, what type of sample it is, the name of the sample. All the pertinent information gets entered in here. Once it's entered in there, then the sample can be taken into the lab where we'll do our next step. So next process, we'll go into the prep lab. Once the sample comes into the prep lab, the first thing we have to do is foreign material testing. So when we do this, we're looking at everything under a microscope, looking for anything from bug particles or rodent feces or hairs or anything that could be foreign to the cannabis sample. Depending on what we find, we either pass or fail the sample at that point. If we do pass it, then the full batch goes on to the next step, which is homogenization. After foreign material testing, the next step in the process is homogenization. So what we have to do is we take the entire batch and homogenize it into one big batch. So you can imagine that that's going to look differently if you have flour or a concentrate or an edible sample. One example that I have here is a flour batch. This batch was from about a 37.5-pound batch. We took approximately 60 grams based on BCC regulations. So when we take that 37.5-pound batch, we randomly sample from the batch. If it's one big bag or 3 bags or 5 bags, we randomly sample from each one to get our desired weight. Once we do, it comes back in the lab. As we've shown before, we do our foreign material testing along with intake. It comes here and it gets homogenized. So you can see we've got the nice homogeneous batch. We've got our metric ID tag, and so from here we can then start weighing out samples for analysis. Following homogenization, the next and one of the most crucial steps in the lab is to accurately weigh every sample, because if we mess up on a weight and have too much weight, that's going to affect everything from potency to, for a concentrate, how much potential residual solvent could be in a sample. So if we don't accurately weigh and record everything that we do, we could put off false analysis, and that's something that we never want to do. So after we weigh our samples, what we have to do is prep the sample itself for the individual analysis. So that happens in this area. So whether it's adding solvent or some sort of reagent or say like an internal standard for pesticide analysis, all that happens in this area. So we use our pipettes, our balances, our vortexers, everything else to make sure that the sample is accurately prepped so that we can then do proper analysis. So moisture analysis works by heating up a sample. When you do this, it causes the moisture in the sample to evaporate, and what we can do with the balance portion of this is measure that loss so that then we can take an accurate measurement for dry weight potency. Next up is water activity. With the water activity analysis, we are measuring the vapor pressure of our sample compared to the vapor pressure of water. So in essence, it is the water that's available for microbial growth. So in our case, if you've got a higher water activity, that gives things like aspergillus mold more of a possibility to be able to grow in a sample, which could lead to possible illnesses, cause people to get sick, and we don't want that to happen. Next up is heavy metal analysis. In this, what we are doing, we are looking for the 4 big heavy metals that are required by the BCC: arsenic, cadmium, mercury, and lead. In order to be able to do this, we actually add acid to our sample. So if it's flour, concentrate, whatever, we add acid to it, and we put it in a vessel, and then it gets microwave digested for an hour and a half. So that allows us to break down all that organic material, so then we can do analysis of the inorganic heavy metals that we're looking for to make sure that your samples that you're ingesting and consuming aren't contaminated with these substances. After microwave digestion, the next thing we do is we have to load the sample on the ICP-MS to be able to do analysis. So then it comes in here, sample gets loaded onto these trays, our arm picks it up, sample comes in, it gets introduced into the ICP-MS to where it then gets broke down in this plasma arc. So this plasma arc burns above 6,000 degrees Kelvin, which for reference, the temperature of the sun is about 5,700 degrees Kelvin, so this burns hotter than the temperature of the sun. It goes in here, the measurement gets taken, and then with our software we can see exactly how much heavy metals, be it cadmium, arsenic, lead, or mercury, are in a particular sample, so we can tell if the sample is contaminated or not. Now this is important in all aspects of cannabis production. Say if you have an outdoor grow, you want to make sure that your soil is not contaminated with heavy metals. So we can take a soil sample and analyze it for lead or mercury or anything like that. With cannabis being a bioaccumulator, if you have lead or mercury in your land, it's going to get transferred into the plant material itself, and then you could possibly fail a compliance test. The next piece of equipment I'm going to talk about is our HPLC. HPLC stands for High Performance Liquid Chromatography. Our particular model is a UHPLC, so it stands for Ultra High Pressure Liquid Chromatography. This is what we do our potency analysis with. So everyone always makes a big deal about potency because, you ask the consumer, THC can never be high enough. So they're always looking for that. So with our HPLC and our proprietary methods that we've developed, we can test your potency. It can be a flower sample, it can be an edible, it can be a gummy, a brownie, a bath bomb of all things, and we can tell you how many cannabinoids are in it. Our next analysis is residual solvent analysis. Here we're looking for trace solvents that may be left over from the manufacturing process. So say someone's making BHO. Well, if they didn't properly purge off all the butane from the BHO, this is the type of test we're going to do to figure that out. So the equipment that we use is a Headspace GCMS single quad. The way that works is that with the Headspace analysis, we take our sample, we put it into a Headspace tube, we add solvent and internal standard, we cap it, and it goes in this machine where it gets heated up, and as it's heated up, those solvents that are left in the sample will start to come off to where we can detect them. So for this, we're looking for 20 some odd different residual solvents. Each have different action limits of where if the sample will pass or fail. Typically this will be for any manufactured product. So one example is you wouldn't do this for just a flower sample for say like partridges or live resins or even potentially edibles. You could do solvent analysis. Next up is terpene analysis. Now, terpene analysis is not absolutely required by the BCC, but if we do it, we list it on the C of A, and it's regulated just like any other test that we do in the lab. Now, for terpenes, we use a GCFID. So FID stands for flame induction detection. So it uses a flame for detection versus a GCMS, which we're looking at masses to be able to do the detection there. So this works similarly. Everything goes into a Headspace vial. The Headspace is then heated up. It then goes through our column to where it hits the flame, and then we get detection or no detection depending if the terpene that we're looking for is present or not. Next up is pesticide analysis. So for pesticides, we actually have to use two different types of mass spec. The first one we're going to talk about is the LCMS, so liquid chromatography mass spec. So similar to the HPLC that we use for potency, LCMS uses an HPLC on the front end and then a mass spec on the back end for detection, where the HPLC for potency uses UV for our detection. With this, LCMS has been around now for quite a long time, but it's used in all sorts of industries. They actually use LCMS to catch Olympic dopers and things of that nature. It's used in all sorts of research, development, drug discovery, but we're using it here to detect for the bulk of our pesticides and also for mycotoxins. Next up in pesticide analysis is our GCMS. So this is the GC triple quad. So different than the LCMS, which analyzes the bulk of our other pesticides and also the mycotoxins, the GC triple quad is used primarily for our really difficult compounds, so the chlorinated pesticides primarily. It works with a harder ionization technique to allow us to be able to better detect these particular compounds versus using an LCMS. Could we use an LCMS? Yes, but this gives us the best way to detect these pesticides, especially because most of them are category 1, meaning if there's any detection of the pesticide, that sample will fail its analysis. Next, we're in our micro lab. So in here's where we do all of our microanalysis. We use a genetic approach to the detection of microbial pathogens. What we're looking for, as required by the BCC, is a few different strains of Aspergillus, mold, and then also Salmonella and E. coli. So we use a qPCR. So this stands for quantitative polymerase chain reaction. By doing this, we can actually tell if there's live microorganism on the particular sample itself, and we use a secondary confirmation analysis to make sure that what we're detecting is from live pathogen versus something where a sample, say, has been remediated to where that the DNA is still left on the material itself, but because we don't see further enrichment down the line, we know that it's not from live pathogens, so we know that this sample would pass analysis. Guys, thanks for coming in today. I hope you enjoyed the tour and it was educational and informative. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of At the Root of It. Today, we have a very special guest. I want to introduce Doug Haubert from the city of Long Beach. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'd love for you to tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Well, good morning, Stephen. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm the city prosecutor of Long Beach. I've been an attorney for 20 years. I've been the city prosecutor for 10 years. And for my entire career, I've worked for cities, for public agencies, working on public policy. Obviously, as city prosecutor, we're devoted locally here to making sure that the city is as safe as possible. So that's what I do for a job, and I love my job, and it's a pleasure to serve the people of Long Beach and to serve you too.
Well, thank you for doing it. I know you work effortlessly at your job and tirelessly. So thank you for doing that. I want to jump right into it. AB Assembly Bill 3330. Can you please explain a little bit about that bill and where it is in the process?
Sure. The bill came about actually as a result of discussions with a number of LBCA members who I know not only were talking to me about the problems that they saw in the community, but also our local assembly member, Patrick O'Donnell, who was on the city council here before, who's very connected locally to what's going on. And a lot of the discussions focused on the problems that the legal permitted industry was having because they were being overrun by people that don't have permits, that aren't regulated, that are selling products that aren't tested in any way. We talked about the dangers of this. In fact, the LBCA members educated me quite a bit on the regulations that they have to go through in order to get permitted, the things they do to limit the impacts on the neighborhoods, to make sure that the product gets in the hands of people who are old enough and not in the hands of kids, to make sure it's safe, free of pesticides. All these regulations exist for those that are permitted. And then there's this entire industry. I'm told it could be 75 to 80% of the industry is completely unregulated. So the entire regulatory scheme collapses if you don't have a way of making sure that people fall under the regulated market. So we actually looked at the problem from a lot of different angles. What we determined through our investigation, through our research, and what we've heard from others, is that the best way to prevent the illicit market from continuing in perpetuity is to limit their ability to reach consumers directly through advertising, through marketing, through apps that basically connect a consumer directly to a seller who doesn't have a license. And it's actually very misleading, and it's unfair for for a website, for example, to have 20 different providers, half of which are illegal. The legal ones are complying with all these rules, a lot of expenses, a lot of regulatory oversight. They're testing their product, they're following the rules, and the other half aren't following any rules. So it's hard to go after that half, but we figured if that illicit half couldn't reach consumers directly through advertising, through marketing, eventually they will wither on the vine and go away. So we've really been focused on the illegal market through preventing them from advertising and marketing and selling their product directly to consumers. So AB 3330 came out of that discussion. AB 3330 doesn't add additional regulations for anybody who's already part of that regulated market, but it prevents the illegal sellers from selling or having people sell for them, either facilitate the sale or help market the sale or advertise the sale of product that doesn't comply with state and local laws. You had asked where we are in the process, and I'll tell you that it's been a learning process for me. The bill got through the Assembly Business and Professions Code. It then got through the Assembly Appropriations Committee. So it's gone through 2 committees already. It's now going to go to the Assembly floor. Today's June 5th, and in 2 weeks we'll know if it gets through the Assembly or not. Once it gets through the Assembly, it has to start all over in the Senate. So it's still an uphill battle. To do this type of an amendment to state law, we need a 2/3 vote of both the Assembly and the Senate. And then, of course, the governor's signature. So we've passed through 2 committees with a majority of votes, but we have not yet overcome the hurdle of the full Assembly by 2/3.
Members, how long ago did that conversation take place, and what did that process just to get to here look like?
I don't know when the conversation started, but it really started in earnest about 2 years ago. The number of people came to me. In fact, I have to give the LBCA credit because they were already complying with a lot of rules before the city adopted those rules through its own municipal code. So the people who had gone through the process, had worked on getting permits, who were actually stopped as a result of litigation, nothing that they did, but litigation stopped the permitting process dead in its tracks. But a number of LBCA members came forward and said, look, we want the same thing that you want. We want an environment where cannabis products are kept out of the hands of children, where it's sold and produced in a way that has minimal impacts on the community, if any at all. That's taxed, so there's revenue for the city. And that revenue can then go and pay for other important vital services, social services for the benefit of the residents. So we really approached this, we were on the same page. We wanted the same thing. And you had asked about AB 3330. Well, that is the result. It's one of the rare occasions that you will see what I see, which is public safety and the cannabis industry coming forward with a common sense solution to a problem that if we are successful, the result will be cannabis will only be sold through a regulated market where the impacts to the community are negligible, where taxes are collected, and it's a safe product and kept away from children. And that's really what everyone is going for. And I think you have Steve Neal on the line. Let me just thank him for all of his help. He's not only with LBCA, but he's a former Long Beach City Councilman. I actually came in with Steve Neal. We were both elected at the same time, and he's been a great partner on a lot of things over the years. So it's good to see him and hear his voice again.
That's really cool. Thank you for all of that. Well, I want to jump into it because you said the city and the cannabis industry would be coming together to push something that is common sense. How does the city feel towards supporting AB 3330?
The city, I think it was just a matter of timing. The bill was stalled at the beginning and then just moved quickly. The city got a support letter in either yesterday or the day before. So the city is now officially in support. Also in support of the bill is UFCW, which is a very large, sophisticated labor organization that has a lot of power in Sacramento and certainly a lot of policy input in Sacramento. but also the California League of Cities, I believe, is supporting the bill now. And I think you're going to see others in the regulated market support the bill, because the goal of the bill is to ensure that cannabis is only sold through the regulated process.
Yes. The next question I have is, so we are going through the census right now. I know there's a lot of people, at least in our community, that has some questions about the census and how can it help. So how does a census help legislation or changing legislation?
Well, the census is done every 10 years to update government data that shows where people live. It also shows demographic breakdowns. The census data, for example, goes to show that Long Beach is one of the largest, most diverse cities in America. And so the census information is used for a lot of things. One of the things it's used for is in funding allocation. Obviously, the people who are making funding decisions are looking for money to be sent to the communities that need it the most, that have the most people, the most need service-wise. And so the census that's taken right now will affect what resources are allocated and where those resources are allocated for the next 10 years until the next census. And lots happened in Long Beach in the last 10 years that I think it's important to capture in this census. Certainly the downtown area of Long Beach has grown exponentially. It's a much better, bigger downtown area than it was 10 or 20 years ago. That's a lot of hard work from a lot of folks, a lot of investment dollars going into Long Beach. So the census will reflect that. It'll also reflect changing demographics. Different parts of the city demographically have changed over the last 10, 20 years. So the census will reveal those trends. You know, Long Beach really is different in so many ways. My office is very different in the way that we provide services. We actually spend more time keeping cases out of court than we do filing cases in court. As Steve Neal will attest to, we actually spend a lot of time, because our theory is that if you can get someone through the criminal justice system and out of it better than they went into the criminal justice system, you're actually not only making it better for that person, but you're making the city a safer place by returning that person to the community, maybe with a job, maybe with some type of education, maybe some training, so that that person doesn't have to commit another crime. It really does set Long Beach apart from other cities.
Also setting Long Beach apart, I feel like, is a lot of people getting involved in local level politics. If anything, just getting engaged in voting. What is your take on the importance of voting and getting active locally?
Well, obviously, all policy is set by elected leaders. Our elected leaders are those that they hire in appointed positions. So who gets elected is extremely important. And I think it has to start early. I've got 2 young daughters, and I used to bring them with me to the polls to vote with me so that they would get in the habit of, on election day is special, you know, you must go to the poll, drop off your ballot or cast your vote at the precinct. So I think voting has to start early. Obviously, it's the most important right that we exercise as citizens, because all other rights are protected as a result of how we vote. So I think it is extremely important in a democracy that we have. If people don't participate in elections, they really can't complain about the outcome.
Exactly. Is there anything that you would like to let the people know or kind of leave a last note of?
Well, I just want to encourage people to continue to be engaged with my office. Long Beach is unique, and you may not know this, but Long Beach is the only city that has an elected city prosecutor position. There are other cities, there are about 12 cities in California that have the power to prosecute and enforce their own laws and state laws in their city. We're one of 12, but we're the only city that does it this way. I'm a separate, independently elected city prosecutor. And because of that, I think I'm far more close to the community. I take input from the community. I want the community to be involved with us. A lot of our diversion and alternative sentencing programs are a direct result of meetings with the Ministers Alliance locally, with Central CHA locally, with the NAACP locally. A lot of these organizations influence what we do, the work we do. So we need that input. So I encourage everyone to continue to be engaged with us. I welcome them. You can always email me at prosecutor@longbeach.gov. Check out our website, and you'll find out just how unique Long Beach is in that respect.
Well, thank you so much, Doug. It was a pleasure chatting with you this morning. Thank you for all the service you do to the community and everyone involved. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. It's my honor and a privilege. And thank you. And you have a great day too.
One thing I wish I knew more about cannabis before I started smoking was how impactful can cannabis be? My name's Robbie, and this is my Cannabis 101. Currently, Prop 64 is on track to meet its campaign promise of $1 billion in annual tax revenue at the height of the cannabis industry. $635 million in local city and state cannabis tax revenue for the fiscal year of 2019. That's 35% over 2018. Like most Californians, you're probably wondering where all this tax money goes towards. I know I was. $100 million in local cannabis business tax will be used for parks and schools. $37.5 million will be used for at-risk youth. $140.8 million will be used towards 11,000 low-income children in childcare. $21.8 million for safer roads. Well, like most, I was curious about all these things. And I'm glad today we have an organization like the LBCA to let us know what's going on with the cannabis community. Make sure to follow the LBCA at the LBCA on Instagram, as well as the LBCA.com.
Hemp for victory.
So, hemp for victory. I wasn't around then, but I heard there was a war in the 1940s called World War II. This war was pretty big. It was across the whole world. Wow, that's very insensitive, right? That's super insensitive. Just be like, oh, there was a war. It was big. It was really big, really bad. And in that war, the United States started to see that imports were almost becoming impossible. In the 1940s, the United States put a temporary ban on the Marijuana Tax Act, which was set in place in 1937. This Marijuana Tax Act made it pretty much illegal, or you had to incriminate yourself if you consumed marijuana, cultivated marijuana, distributed it, manufactured it, anything. It was illegal. You'd pretty much go to jail. So they said, hey, hemp makes a pretty good rope. The Navy needs some rope because we can't get any more from the Philippines. So the United States government decided to make a movie because they love making movies, if you don't remember Reefer Madness.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe or watch case. In this startling film, you will see dopesters lure children to destruction.
We're going over to Joe's place. Why don't you come along?
We have a date to play, a set of doubles.
Oh, you can play anytime. Come on, we'll have some laughs.
Can I go along with you?
Sure.
Hey, I'll see you at dinner, sis.
If you want a good smoke, try one of these.
You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will as he takes the first step toward enslavement.
Of course, if you're afraid.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide. The movies pretty much encouraged farmers in America, pretty much specifically Kentucky, to grow and cultivate and manufacture hemp and hemp products. And when you did, you applied for this Hemp for Victory program, you were awarded a certificate or a card that pretty much said you were a marijuana producer. So, just a few years before that, you had this crazy tax act set in place specifically for this dangerous drug. And you got to remember, cannabis prohibition is still going on. And the federal government said, hey, let's use hemp for our benefit. So initially, the program did very well. They had about 14,000 acres dedicated to producing and cultivating hemp. And by the end of the program, they had 500,000 acres. 500,000 acres encouraged to grow and produce cannabis, marijuana, in the 1940s during cannabis prohibition. They saw this need to put a halt on a tax so that they can reap its benefit. And then right after the war was done, the program was shut down and the Marijuana Tax Act continued its course, and if anything, led to worse legislation and policy towards the entire fight and war on drugs. So, I'm going to play some clips of this footage. I mean, the United States government is going to tell you how to grow and cultivate hemp. That's what the entire movie was. It wasn't really even a campaign. It was like, hey, this is a female plant. This is a male plant. This is the seeds. This is what you need to do. And it was crazy to me because the entire time they're saying if you can grow corn, you can grow marijuana. They're like, it's the same plant. It's not different. If you could do it this way, you could even use the same tools. It was fine. And so now we're in 2020. Cannabis is an essential business, and we still have people in the government, in society. I mean, if you want to trust the government, cool. I could completely support that. But if you want to say that the government doesn't say that cannabis is okay, and you want to believe the government and you want to reply by that, but look back to 1940. Look back to then and how much it benefited the economy. It benefited our country. And now look at cannabis being an essential workforce, and you still want to say it's this demonized plant. It's just a plant.
In those days, hemp was an important crop in Kentucky and Missouri. Then came cheaper imported fibers for cordage, like jute, sisal, and manila hemp, and the culture of hemp in America declined. But now, with Philippine and East Indian sources of hemp in the hands of the Japanese, and shipment of jute from India curtailed, American hemp must meet the needs of our Army and Navy, as well as of our industries. In 1942, patriotic farmers, at the government's request, planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand%. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp. Soil that will grow good corn will usually grow hemp. Hemp is not hard on the soil. In Kentucky, it has been grown for several years on the same ground, though this practice is not recommended. A dense and shady crop, hemp tends to choke out weeds. Here's a Canada thistle that couldn't stand the competition. Dead as a dodo. Thus, hemp leaves the ground in good condition for the following crop. For fiber, hemp should be sown 5 pecks to the acre. With drill, the closer the rows, the better. These rows are spaced about 4 inches. This hemp has been broadcast. Either way, it should be sown thick enough to grow a slender stalk. Hemp for fiber is ready to harvest when the pollen is shedding and the leaves are falling. In Kentucky, hemp harvest comes in August. Here, the old standby has been the self-rake reaper, which has been used for a generation or more. Hemp grows so luxuriantly in Kentucky that harvesting is sometimes difficult, which may account for the popularity of the self-rake with its lateral stroke. Thus, hemp, Cannabis sativa, the old standby cordage fiber, is staging a strong comeback. This is Kentucky hemp going into the dryer of a mill at Versailles. In the old days, breaking was done by hand, one of the hardest jobs known to man. Now the power breaker makes quick work of it. All such plants will presently be turning out products spun from American-grown hemp. Twine of various kinds for tying, winding armatures, and upholsterers' work. Rope for marine rigging and towing, for hay forks, derricks, and heavy-duty tackle. Light-duty fire hose. Thread for shoes for millions of American soldiers. And parachute webbing for our paratroopers. When that is gone, American hemp will go on duty again. Hemp for mooring ships. hemp for tow lines, hemp for tackle and gear, hemp for countless naval uses, both on ship and shore. Hemp for victory.
Huh? Yeah, I watched the whole movie. The whole movie is literally, and this is what I was going to talk about when I was high, because the whole movie is them just farming. It teaches them how to farm. It's literally like, okay, you want to do this stock is worse than the other. This stock is better than the other. Relatively, it's a very boring ass movie. Like, there's no point to it, but it's just so shocking because these assholes are the ones who like talk about, who pretty much put in the Marijuana Tax Act. Like, the whole film takes place in Kentucky. So they're like, you can farm corn here, you can farm marijuana, and it's no big deal. And it's just like, okay, you produce this by the government, you have this film, and you want Americans to do it. And actually said within the first year, their goal was to have, they had 14,000 acres of marijuana cultivating. By the end of the entire program, there were 500,000 acres that were being cultivated for marijuana. As soon as the war ended, though, Hemp for Victory program was shut down and the Marijuana Tax Act was still set in place. So that's kind of where it's like, where it really just annoyed me is that like everyone can still be so blind to the fact of how powerful that this plant is. So it's kind of like, when's everyone gonna wake up? The biggest thing that I realize is like, to them, in reality, corn is exactly like mass manufacturing hemp. If you can grow the same amount of corn, you can grow the same amount of hemp. I mean, apparently when they want it to be. I mean, we all know that in 1990, in 2003, they were awarded the patent on CBD. So it's kind of like, yeah, when they want. That's what Hemp for Victory is. Hemp for Victory was a program that was set in place by the United States government when they wanted to mass manufacture hemp and hemp products in the middle of the country in Kentucky. And it was cool. But if you did it any other time, it was bad. And if you did it after that, it was bad. Even though you can literally be like, look in history, it was fine. And then my question is like, back then, so now you have all these farmers, all these people cultivating hemp. And even in the film, it talks about females and male seeds. Like it goes in depth with all of that. It's like, were there people actually cultivating farms? And like, what was that like? What was that underground market like? So traditional market. If you want to look back in history and you want to say, what has cannabis done? Why is cannabis even around? Well, in my book, cannabis has saved the world twice. With Hemp for Victory in 1940 and with the 2020 pandemic. Cannabis is essential and medical cannabis is here to stay. But don't forget, plant-based education. Sorry. All right.
You take that bit.
It's 2020. We're halfway through the year. Cannabis is essential and Hemp for Victory was a successful program. I hope that one day the federal government will get on the same page with us. But for now, you can find more information in cannabis history at thelbca.com or follow us at the LBCA on all social media platforms.